Oh my god. I have been trying to just do this for like a good 2 hours. I don't know what I did to my laptop to make it feel like it has a personal vendetta against me, but holy shit. Oh my god. I know I'm blowing out the audio right now because I'm watching it going. I'm watching this, but oh my god. Anyway, Lord have mercy. Hallo, wie geht's dir? Hello, how are you? Welcome. Um, so this is the only way I'm thinking I'm going to be able to get through just being a human. So feel free to human with me. That's not a ripoff of Brittany Simon's work. It just came to me spontaneously. But I do agree with her sentiment that humans are gonna human. Um, I feel like at this point in my recovery journey, I need to start speaking my truth. I'm so sorry. My heater. Hold on. Okay, I'm sorry. It's cold. If you can hear my heater in the background, let it just be like nice white noise and listen to the soothing tones of my voice. Okay, so welcome to what I'm going to affectionately call the Emotional Cactus Podcast. I am Dottie, your resident emotional cactus. And welcome to our first episode. I am a CPTSD survivor. No, I'm a domestic violence survivor. And that would not be partner, that would be familial. So, and I'm just here to unpack and potentially heal. And I just need at this point to word vomit, get it straight, and sort of leave it potentially somewhere else that is not in my head. There are a lot of things that there, and I will apologize in advance. I do have a little bit of a speech. I don't know if you would call it a lisp or a stutter, but I do have a little bit of a speech thing, so please just don't mind that. So today for our first episode, because I am just having a wretched time doing the whole self-care thing, is we're going to talk about why my female parent, I'm reluctant to call her my mother because she wasn't one. So just to be respectful, because I'm not here to call her a crazy witch or anything like that. I don't want to, because at the end of the day, she is a person. So I'll do it like this. So when I say my abuser, I am talking about my female parent, my biological female parent. So, but from going forward, I'm just going to refer to her as my abuser. So, I did have a male parent who was also abusive, but his level of abuse compared to my female parent's level of abuse was not even comparable to how much damage she's done. So, we're going to talk about internalized misogyny because that honestly, I feel like is the crux for a lot of my difficulty or a lot of my dissociation. I don't even know what you would call it. Dissociation, sort of triggering. We're here to just talk it through. But so my mom has there are multiple children in my family, and I'm going to stay vague throughout this process because I genuinely have a real concern that if I'm not vague enough, I'm going to have people try and find me, and I don't want to be found. So, my family of origin has multiple children. I am one of the older middle children in this family. I am also the first girl child in my immediate family. If you're hearing the crying in the background, it is my cat. She is not allowed in the room right now because she likes to chew on wires. Moving on. So, my mom did not want female children. Now, my mom was... I did it again. My abuser is someone who has internalized that boys are more valuable than girls, right? That is like the most simplistic, non-nuanced way I could explain internalized misogyny. So, in her view, what she needed to do as a child was rid herself of her so-called weakness of being a female child. So, she didn't wear makeup, she didn't like feminine clothing, she preferred to keep her hair in simple styles. She didn't do a lot of traditionally female things, or had traditionally female hobbies, like, art or sewing, right? She didn't do any of that, and she didn't do any of that because she has this deeply held belief that girls are inferior to boys, and to elevate herself out of her inferiority, she needed to be as boyish as possible. And no, and let me stop here. This is not a gender conversation. This is me expressing my trauma. Please do not come into my comments at any point and talk about gender expression, transgenderism, or any of that. That's not what we're here to do. This is just what I've experienced. It's my personal perspective about how I experienced this and why it was damaging for me, so I can move through it, get right, because at this point, you can't go over it, you can't go around it, you can't go under it, you gotta go through. I am just trying to talk through and articulate why her view of girlhood and femaleness and womanhood was damaging to me in this specific context. Okay. So in her mind, she needed to eradicate all things that could potentially be linked to womanhood, girlhood, because she did not want to be weak. She did not want to be inferior. And she was looking to be more valuable to the adults in her life. And in her mind, that was going to give her power. I don't want to go through my abuser's history, because I really do strongly believe that that is her story to tell if she ever chooses to tell it. I will give you age though. So her trauma, the most significant, the biggest, most kind of catastrophic event for her happened when she was 3 years old. Right? So that is in the critical window of brain development, empathy development, like attachment, and it did not resolve ever. It's that this particular event was something that is still ongoing to this day within this family. The consequences are ongoing, ever echoing within this family dynamic. So fast forward 20-ish years, she has her first child, which is a boy, and then she has me, and I'm a girl. And I really do believe in like this idea that there is somebody playing games upstairs because my mom got the girliest girl of all the girls, right? From a very early age, I was a very, very, very feminine identified, right? I was not a tomboy in any right as a small child. Now, she was able to condition me out of that as I got older, but as a small child who didn't have any impulse control, didn't really understand, you know what I mean? Like little kids, when you're 5, that's as authentic as most people get in their whole lives. Just because your brain isn't developed enough to be like, good thing, bad thing, and you're not socialized enough to care. So, just a long story short, I was a girl's girl. I liked wearing pretty clothes. I liked skirts. I wanted my dresses. I liked having my hair done nicely. I liked baby dolls. I liked sort of traditionally feminine woman associated activities, right? I was a writer, not at 5, but you know what I mean. So my talents were within the creative realm, right? So that's considered to be traditionally feminine. So writing, painting, art, singing, music, all of dancing, all of those things, like sewing and like fiber textile things, like those were all things that were in my wheelhouse that were very strongly pronounced to the point that even though I was never exposed to things like sewing, I was never exposed to some things, like I was never exposed to certain things, right? Because, like, at the age of, 10, I just knew that I wanted to learn how to knit or crochet. My mom never knit or crochet. Nobody ever brought up knitting or crocheting around me. It's just that I so innately have this creative, sort of feminine aligned spirit that it didn't matter. It was going to express itself regardless. Now, that irked my mother for many reasons. She didn't want female children, and she certainly did not want a female child that was like me, who was very feminine, who was very outwardly feminine, who was very emotionally sensitive, and didn't have any of these boy attributes she had so carefully collected to make herself less weak and worthless, right? So, growing up, that was something she would go on, she didn't try to, she did. She would go on to aggressively attempt to burn the sickness out of me, right? So, as a kid, I was not allowed to wear girls' clothes. Now, caveat, my family was very poor. Both of my parents are disordered people. They don't manage money well. And I've seen that firsthand now as an adult, how they don't do their finances well at all. So it's not surprising to me that as a child, as a young kid, I would be wearing like t-shirts and hand-me-downs from my brother. But getting older, getting into being 8, 9, 10, 11, still having to wear hand-me-down boy clothes was very intentional on my mom's part. She did not want a girly girl for a daughter. And my mom's modus operandi, my whole family of origins MO is to passive aggressively force behavior. Rather than just asking for it, it's essentially I'm going to withhold sometimes basics like food until I get the behavior that I want. I'm never going to articulate myself. I'm just going to make you guess what it is I want from you. So, for my mom, she could simply withhold age-appropriate, feminine aligned clothing. So, I didn't get dresses. She could withhold girl toys. There was an incident. Okay, so my mom is a chronic oversharer because because she was so isolated in her very domestically violent marriage. I was essentially her surrogate spouse. So we had no boundaries. She told me way more than I needed to know, and I'm fairly certain now that some of these things that she would let slip, in quotes, were meant to hurt and harm, 1000%. So she would tell me, I never wanted you to have dolls, right? I didn't want to give you dolls. I was only going to give you, I think she said stuffed animals at the time. But I didn't want any of you to have dolls. I wanted you to have, because I'm not the only female child, I only wanted you to have stuffed animals. Or I remember there was one time where I got like a kid's makeup set with like the fake makeup, and I was maybe I was fairly young, 5 or 6, and I'm doing it wrong obviously because I'm 5 or 6. I put too much on. My mom comes in, and not in like an amused adult way, in a very nasty mocking way. She was like, you look like a clown. And understanding context now, there was probably an F-bomb before clown. So, I'm in this situation, and this goes on, and goes on, and goes on, and goes on, right? So, because I'm a minor child, she can control what I wear. She can control whether or not I wear makeup, or have access to makeup. She can control how my hair is done. She controls pretty much all of my outward appearance and my grooming habits in the makeup department. Like, no, and this is also something that I'm going to have to get into later, is my deconstruction from the freaking fundamentalist Christian cult she joined. But she was someone who, because of her isolation, she turned to the church to feel less lonely and less alone and have community, which is how they do it. They prey on people like my mom. I'm not gonna say abuser. I'm just gonna say mom. Sorry. They prey on people like my mom because it's very easy to manipulate people who are in dangerous, scary situations but don't have anywhere to go. So, I remember being around, I want to say like puberty. So like 10, 11, 12. In those ages where it was very clear to me that a lot of her anger towards me was because I wasn't doing it well enough. Now, so I told you, she's controlling the way that I'm sort of grooming myself, right? The way I'm dressing and things like that, right? We're not doing hair, we're not doing nails, and again, the makeup and the whole point of me bringing up the religious bit was to say, like, her reasoning for not letting me wear makeup or paint my nails was because that's essentially what prostitutes do, right? You don't want to be too fast, don't want to grow up too fast. And I'm like, I'm almost a teenager. This is weird. But that's the whole thing. Like, we want to stay modest, right? Modesty culture. But that was the religious bit as far as why I was not allowed to do things that were age appropriate. So, no makeup, but really more to because she was very determined to make me into this miniature version of her. And I was not allowed to have my own personality, I didn't understand she was doing this at the time, but she would do those passive aggressive punishments, right? Which is just the withholding. I'm not gonna give you what you want until I'm not gonna give you what I know you want. So not only was there like this component of you need to look like a tomboy. Essentially I'm going to force tomboy on you. I'm also going to force like boy, male aligned, masculine, traditionally masculine activities on you too. So her big thing was she wanted sporty athlete children because she was a sporty child. Are you seeing a theme? If she felt like she identified with something, then that meant all of her children also needed to identify with something. Having your own identity was a sin. But like I said, who I am, especially in the femininity department, is so deep in my personality that there was no amount of her setting me on fire, emotionally speaking, metaphorically speaking, that was going to burn that out of me or make me stop doing it. So her thing was she was going to force me to do sports. I have zero aptitude for sports. I have zero interest in sports. I would even go so far as to say I have not a single athletic bone in my body. I just don't. It is simply not something that I'm good at. We all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses, and being sporty is not something that's in me as a person. But she was forever trying to force it on me. There was never a year we weren't doing soccer or basketball, or she was forcing me to try a different sport like track. And it was never an option. Which is also something that I'm finding is I'm remembering more, is she would just decide I was gonna go do an activity, not ask me, not tell me, just randomly one day I would be getting dropped off at practice with kids I didn't know from typically not from school. Do you know what I mean? So it's not like she was asking me, she was just forcing it on me. And then telling me that I was ungrateful or embarrassing when I would be crying because somebody just ran the fuck into me. Excuse my language. Or I would just be asking her, can you please not make me do this? Always fell on deaf ears. She never wanted to listen. It never mattered. It was just something that she liked to do, therefore I was gonna like it, and me telling her otherwise was me being ungrateful and whiny, etc., etc., etc. Now, I truly believe that my mom falls more into a borderline organization of her personality, but that's definitely more of a narcissistic. I have such a hard time saying that word. I don't know why, but that's very much so more of a narcissistic sort of a thing where if I like something, I can't fathom anybody else not liking the thing or having different wants and opinions, right? But she was doing this, I think, for another reason. So A, she was physically stripping me of my infirmity of being being feminine and female, and preferring to present that way. And then she was aggressive. that's the only good word I have for that. If I think of another word, I'll correct myself. But she was aggressive about not allowing me to do things that were feminine aligned, or she considered to be not real or worth the time. Things that she personally wasn't interested in, right? Because for some reason, people who are disordered like my parents, based on what I've read and what I've spoken with my own therapist, is that they don't have like depth of field. They don't understand that other people are like other people, right? They don't understand that other people are three-dimensional. Everyone is kind of like a two-dimensional insert in their own personal world, because everything revolves around them and their wants and their needs and their preferences. So there's no room for Olivia's writing hobby, right? So because I am an artist by nature, that was something, again, and that's something that's feminine aligned and not in the STEM. So I'm sorry. So there were three things we were allowed to be growing up. You could be an athlete, a doctor, a lawyer, or some sort of tech person, and then business. Those were like the 5 things you were allowed to be. And I think a lot of people in like Black and immigrant and people of color communities can relate to that when I say that our parents really believe in there being real careers and making real money. But I digress. Obviously, creative paths were not real careers, and they didn't make real money. So here's what I think, because I'm currently, my focus is getting really top-notch, amazing self-esteem. That's what I want for myself. That is my current focus right now. So as I'm working through it, I'm looking for, like, where is the root? And I think this root is in my mom trying to make me into the boy she wished I was, instead of letting me be the girl who... instead of letting me just be my own person. So, and this is just dark and sad and sick, but I think the reason, A, not a real career, and B, not something I personally identify with, but also C, I think there was a part of her that like felt superior to me because I didn't have aptitudes to do sports like she did as a kid. So, and then on top of that, she got to be like this martyr, long-suffering, patient parent with her clumsy, bumbling daughter, right? So, forcing me to do sports, because she can obviously see I'm not good at it and I'm not enjoying myself. But forcing that on me, and then being able to sort of be like a long-suffering parent to other people, and then also feeling superior, A, by being a long-suffering parent, and B, my ineptitude in that particular field. I think she was getting off on feeling superior and then gaining that sort of that pity party sympathy from other people from other parents, right? Which is just very sick and sad. But on the opposite side of that coin, the reason why she was so aggressive about not allowing me to do things that were clearly my strengths, things that I would win awards for at school or get really good feedback, or I would be allowed into, like, I would be offered really high praise for and get really good grades on creative pursuits. Because A, it didn't align with her personal value system, because again, girls and feminine things are inferior to boys. So me having this thing that I was better at than my other male sibling was unacceptable, because anything that doesn't uphold her personal beliefs is a threat to her existence. And she acts like that on a regular basis. Now, I'm no longer in contact with her, so I don't know. But also, me being good at something she wasn't good at, I think in her black and white mind made me superior to her and her inferior to me, and that could not be abided by whatsoever. So my whole life, and then so on top of that, I'm also not good at math. I've always struggled in math. I've managed to do okay, but it takes a big effort. So the only things that growing up that my parents would harp on is me not being good at sports and how difficult a time I had on math. There was never, ever any praise from my parents. From the people at school, and when I would go to after school programs, I would get affirmed. I would have my little gold stars and things like that. I would have my little stickers and stuff like that. But my parents would just completely ignore if I'd done a good job, or I had gotten a particularly good review, or I'd brought home a little trinket, a little award for something creative that I'd done, and go back to only exclusively focusing on the fact that I was not good at sports and I was not good at math, and they were just constantly drilling me about how because I wasn't measuring up in these two fields that they felt I needed to be, that I was just worthless. I was useless. I was a girl. And then on top of that was sort of, I think now it was intentionally meant to humiliate me by making me wear boys' clothes. But then there was the thing of not allowing me to present femininely or have any really bodily autonomy in that realm for way too long. Right? So, and then my mom would try and take them harping on me about not being good at sports and not being good at math, and then attach it to my worth, right? So she would say things like, well, I don't do things for you because you're not grateful, etc., etc., etc. Refuse to do things like get colored pencils because I wasn't, again, refuse to, again, it's that withholding, because that was her way of abusing, was just via neglect. Just good old-fashioned hardcore neglect was by withholding, right? You don't deserve it. And the message was that you're not worthy. You are not worth me expending resources on you. Now beg. And that's really what she wanted me to do. I figured that out many years later. But what she wanted me to do was to sort of posture my subservience to her by whining for things like a distressed 3-year-old. But I wouldn't. My mom only had that much power over me because she had access to all of the resources for 15 years of my life. So almost 2 decades, right? That is plenty of time to condition someone pretty aggressively from birth, right? So you've got me from birth through my sensitive years, one about, which is like 0 to I think it's like 3 or 5. So now coming back to, and she applied that to everything, right? You're not worth food, you're not worth clothes, you're not worth activities because you don't perform the way I want you to in X, Y, or Z realm, so I'm not gonna do things for you. And again, she's a chronic oversharer, and she would try and get me to like So she would try and do these sneak attack shaming sessions when really it just made her sound insane. And every time she would do this, I would trust her less. But she would randomly say something very cruel, hoping it would get her a groveling session, and it never did. So, a great example, and this is also very telling, and I think it corroborates my realization. There was one day we were in the car. She often would drag me along to these marathon Walmart trips where we would just wander around the store for hours. I don't know. But there was one time we were driving and we're not talking, and I'm just sitting there because I don't want to be there. It was always very late at night. And she just randomly turned to me and said, "This is why I don't do things for you. I will do things for..." No. She said, "You're not..." And again, we're not talking. This is not context specific. This is just out of the clear blue sky, looking for a reaction, attempting to shame me because of something that went through... Because of something she decided was happening, irrespective to reality. So she goes, out of the clear blue sky, "You're not nice enough to me. That's why I don't do things for you. That's why I do things for your younger brother, because he's nice to me." Mind you, at this time, my younger brother was still a baby. He was maybe 1 or 2, right? So, and I'm just about 12 in this story. So you're comparing me to an 18-month-old child. I'll say it's 18 months. You're comparing me to an 18-month-old child who doesn't have the brain capacity to say no or resist you. And again, this is a boy. Boys can do no wrong. Girls are the ones that are the bad ones. And she's clearly looking for a reaction from me. And when she doesn't get one, she's angry for the rest of the night. And because she feels embarrassed, later on during this shopping trip, she confronts me. Again, we're not talking. We're not having a conversation. I am stood by the cart, waiting for her to do whatever it is she's doing in whatever aisle, and I'm just staring off into the distance because my mom would shop for 5 hours but not buy anything. So I'm 12 at this point. I know better than to ask for anything, so I'm just hanging out by the cart. Again, we're not having a conversation. We weren't talking before because she's pouting, because she's not gotten the groveling response that she wanted. So she confronts me randomly, again, trying to get a reaction. And she goes, "Sometimes you look at me like you really hate me." And I just looked at her. Because, again, I'm not looking at her directly. She reappeared from a corner. She wasn't in front of me 2 seconds ago. She startled me, actually. And I don't even, again, when she would do stuff like that, I wouldn't have words because I'm just like, okay, I need more context. What are you talking about? What is going on right now? We've been in the store for 4 hours. It's like 9-10 o'clock at night. It's a school night. And I haven't eaten since like 6 or 7 o'clock. I'm tired, I'm hungry, and I would like to go home. But in her mind, me being tired was hatred. But I'm sure she's inferring that because she didn't get the groveling 3-year-old response when she said the first mean thing. So again, I'm looking at her like, what are you talking about? Because I'm 12 and not 18 months old. But again, why are you comparing me to someone whose brain is not cognitively developed to a level where they could even say no to you? Anyway. So, at the root of it, it was my parents only harping on things that I wasn't good at. And sort of, maybe it was a narcissistic injury. I have such a hard time with that word. Maybe it was a narc injury. That's easier. Because I was saying, no, I don't want to. And why would you not want to? You're a two-dimensional character in my world. You can do whatever I want you to. Dance, monkey, dance. I have no idea. But I think that's where it comes from, because both of my parents would do this. But my mom more so, because my dad did not want children. He did not want to be married. He just did it because it gave him a level of status. But she would only focus on the things that I couldn't do, only harp on the things that I couldn't do, only allow me to do things that I was bad at. She would pay money for me to do things that I was bad at, and then rage at me if I would ask her for colored pencils every once in a blue moon. And if I did get a good grade or a little like sticker, star, little award from school for something creative, it may as well have not happened, right? Completely ignore, completely suppress, completely not support, completely withhold all resources for anything that I had any aptitude for, and only focus on, look at things that making me do things that I didn't want, didn't like, and then whining about how I was being ungrateful for being forced to do things I didn't want to do. Right? And I think at the core of it, that's where, like, that is the root of why I have self-esteem issues now, on top of the being forced to wear boy clothes. So I'm not allowed at all to express myself. My being who I am is getting me punished, and no matter how hard I try, because I'm only allowed to do things I'm not good at, I'm quote air quotes failing at anything I'm allowed to do. So very intentional. Again, I don't know how conscious my mom is anymore because of what's happened over the years, but very intentional. Absolutely, consciously or subconsciously, absolutely intentional. She did not want me to do better than her. She did not want me to feel like she did not want to feel like I was doing better than her in any regard. In any way. And she really would harp on this idea that because I was a girl and because I was a very feminine girl, that was my biggest transgression, and she would just aggressively try to burn that out of me. But she was getting this sort of supply from watching me fail over and over and over again, and then looking like a long-suffering parent for having a kid who fails over and over again, and then getting that that feeling of superiority because, well, I was good at soccer, why aren't you good at soccer? And then simultaneously suppressing who I really was and keeping me away from my strengths because it didn't make her look or feel good about herself. And it outshone her golden boys because anything I can do creatively is much more and above and beyond what my siblings are able to do in maths and sports-wise. Like, none of us were star athletes, but I was particularly bad at sports, so it made my siblings look good. And none of us are math geniuses, but I was so bad at math, my siblings sort of being a little bit above average made them look amazing compared to me. But in any kind of creative endeavor, I was always one of the best in my class, in my grade. And again, because my mom had decided that a girl was inferior, I could not outcompete my brothers in anything. So, moving forward, I'm pursuing my art. I'm pursuing being more authentic. This year, I'm gonna focus on getting a new job, because right now I'm realizing that a lot of my choices do go back to this trauma of her trying to aggressively separate me from my authentic self. So working in the field that I'm working in does not allow me to express myself in a feminine way, simply because it's not safe. And because we spend so much time at work, I don't want to continue to not be able to find outlets for my femininity, and it's constantly me going into my closet and getting the baggy t-shirt and the ill-fitting jeans, or really not being able to wear makeup to work. And I know that sounds silly, but I think, well, A, I can get a better paying job, number one, but B, I think it's really important for me to start building a life that is attuned to me, rather than continuing this sort of really toxic trend of abandoning who I am and trying to force myself into people, places, and things that are not attuned to me, that are not for me, that are not good for me as a person, that do not allow me to be who I am. And again, I'm not trying to avoid work, but where I'm working now, the more I meditate on some of these things that I've been through, the more I'm seeing that I work where I work out of a trauma response. It's really crazy. But I'm hoping to get out of that and be able to transition into a job where I'm able to present more femininely. But that's something that I'm also working on, is because that was so aggressively discouraged. I want to get back to the little girl who wants to be cute all the time, who wears the dresses, who does her nails nicely, who wears appropriate makeup, who likes to have her hair done. Now, I am a person of color. I'm a black person, so I find it very difficult to take care of my hair. I prefer short hairstyles simply for ease of care. But I think I can find someone who will cut it for me femininely and make it look cute. So that's what I'm going to do from there. But also at the same time, I'm not going to force myself to do things that I'm not good at or I don't like. I'm going to really try and focus on living an attuned life like my mother should have been doing. Instead of trying to dismantle me and rebuild me in her image like Frankenstein's monster, I just get to be me and who I authentically am and live my authentic life, outside of her and her weird internalized misogyny bullshit and real and fake job bullshit. Alright, I have talked for a very long time. We'll see if this audio compresses nicely. Fingers crossed. Alright, so I don't have an outro. So I'll say this. This has been Dottie, once again, your resident emotional cactus. And I would like to say, please take care of yourself and have a good day. Tschüss!